speaker on this session, Steve Bossaman. But during the break, I met Chris from UC Merced, who is looking at an innovation accelerator and wanting to start new companies and spin-offs out of some of the technology coming from UC Merced. And so we got him introduced over here to Curtis from the Small Business Development Center. So we've got the networking starting to happen. And there's a UC Merced student sitting in the back with some Tom's shoes on. Are you guys familiar with Tom's shoes? Tom's donates shoes in third world countries for people that don't have shoes or footwear. And so they use a percentage of their profits. And they look just like a social enterprise. But they're a little opposite. I mean, they're for-profit shoes first. Secondary, they're to provide shoes in impoverished areas. If you were to reverse that and they wanted to provide shoes for everybody first, but make a profit doing it, you would have a social enterprise. So to understand a little bit more about this, we're going to ask Stephen to go through a presentation that he's brought to us and prepared just for us today. And he said that he's willing to take questions during the presentation. So Flip and I and some others will kind of watch you, so if you raise your hand, we'll be able to get Stephen's attention, and he'll be able to address your question. So please welcome Steve.
Well, good morning. Are we having fun yet?
We are, yeah.
Oh, that's good, that's good. Well, I'm here from Ohio. You'll find that to be a little bit of a telling here as I go through this process of showing the presentation. The presentation is built off of results from 2 grants that I've been co-PI, co-principal investigator on these grants. One of them is the USDA Specialty Crop Research Initiative, and specifically in the area of regional partnerships for innovation. So it's a very unique sector, if you will, that the USDA decided to fund. We used it as as a social networking platform to catalyze local food systems in a 3-state area, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. As a result of that grant, we then were able to leverage into a more regional grant in Northeast Ohio through the Fund for Our Economic Future. This is a collection of various foundations in the Cleveland area particularly, who were very interested in seeing how we might be able to create an ag bioscience industry cluster. This is what happens when you pay attention to Washington. Washington says a lot of these fancy terms, like we're in the industry clusters now. So in order to comply with that, we have that drive in the Northeast Ohio to be able to do the same thing. So that ag bioscience industry cluster is intended to deliver on 2 things: create a lot of jobs and increase the income. And then along the way, if we can have some community wealth built, that would also be very good. But our principal interest is jobs and income, which, by the way, aligns very nicely with the USDA goals as we look at where they're going with their funding in that same direction. That kind of brings me to another kind of resource that I've drawn a great deal of insight from. How many of you are familiar with the black swan effect, black swan event? Okay, there's an author by the name of Nassim Taleb, T-A-L-E-B, and he's written a series of books actually, dealing with this phenomenon of the highly improbable, inexplicable, and unanticipated event that is, in the parlance of Christensen, very disruptive. And usually we only know about a black swan event after it has occurred. So what's kind of happened to me professionally over the last, these grants now have run their course. We're done with the USDA grant. We got an extension in order to write all the reports, you know, so that you can turn it in and make sure that you've pointed out to them how you've complied with everything that they wanted you to do, but you may not have really had much real impact. That's beside the point. That as we look at what we're in right now, though, we're in a black swan event. This is my opinion. The whole Arab Spring into American autumn has changed the game dramatically. So our ability to connect ourselves and to create organizations spontaneously that have incredible impact and can be sustained over a long period of time, irrespective of what the dominant culture has in place, is truly a major step forward in what we're able to do. So it's been so disruptive, at least from my vantage point, that I'm going to talk about work that we did as a result of the grants. But I'm no longer interested in the grants because there's a whole other way that people can organize themselves to address what is right now a dramatically changed landscape that we're in. So, not to sound too melodramatic, but you know, like this is a fairly big deal. Okay, so what we're going to talk about then. This whole notion about the first thing you have to do, you can't sustain something if you aren't surviving. So it's got to survive first, and then you sustain. We get opportunity out of crisis. Everyone counts. So, I mean, we're going to talk a lot about participation and who's in and who's not. And then get a little toolkit going for social entrepreneurs, and then end up with this notion around a community of social entrepreneurs, which is the theme of this. A little bit of definition of terms. Everybody's got to have something that they're going to talk about, terms they're going to use. So community, I'm talking about everyone within a specific geographic area. So we don't want to talk about global economy, or community, or regional community. We're talking about right here where we live and reside. And that gets us into this notion of local. I get into a lot of discussion with people about what's local and how hard it is. It's as close to home as you can get. So right next to you, and then however far out you have to go, that's the definition of local. So it's as close as you can get. Resources. I'm not just talking about financial resources here. I'm talking about human capital, which, as you've already gathered from previous speakers, we're talking about social capital, political capital, intellectual capital, individual capital. Those are the four that get grouped up in human capital. Then we're talking about built capital, natural capital, and of course, obviously, financial capital. But all of them together. And then sustainability, and this is just the survival of the community over a block of time. Survival, again, is kind of at the core of it. In order to really understand what we're trying to accomplish here with a local economy, or the localization of a community, or a community taking responsibility for its sustainability, we are down to the first two levels of Maslow's hierarchy. The only metrics that count for anyone in any community start with, do I have any water to drink today, and where do I get it? Do I have any food to eat today? Where do I get it? Do I have a way to stay warm when it's cold? Do I have a way to stay cool when it's hot? Do I have a place where I can sleep? Am I safe? Do I have access to first aid in the event of an accident, of an emergency situation? Those are kind of the basics. I've just recounted some of them in there to look at the metrics. So those metrics, every day, every one of us has a need for each one of those that are lined up there. And if we don't get them, our survival is at risk. And if we're not surviving, there's not a chance of sustainability. So I really like to get into the point of consumption, as I call it. There's a fellow named Vinay Gupta, and he's He's done a lot of research into understanding what happens within a community as it tries to take on this issue of what does it take to survive. This is a YouTube video. I'm not going to play it for you. By the way, this presentation will be available to you. It will be online. It will have all of the links in it. So all you have to do is just click on the links. It takes you to the YouTube videos that are in it, any of the references to websites, other presentations that have information in them that will back up what's in this presentation, so you don't need to worry about where you're going to get it. It will be available for you as soon as you leave. So anyway, today he goes in and he pretty well lays it out as to here are the things that are going to kill you, and a community that's really on top of its people and what it's doing is going to find a way to minimize that impact of those things that will get you in trouble and cause death. And over that process, a sustainable community is built. An example is, he's the inventor of this hexayurt, which is a dwelling, a shelter that can be created, built for like less than $100 worth of material. He put it in the Burning Man this year. It was out there as an example. There are many, it's open source, so he gives it all away. And there's a whole community of people around the world who are experimenting with different ways they can put that kind of a structure together. The point is, if you've got a community that has any homeless in it, it's by your choice that you have homeless. It's not for lack of a way to remedy the problem.